Hello, I'm Rahema from We Learn to Share, and I will be teaching you Python basics. Firstly, the most basic thing people start Python with is print hello world. Two things to note is that Python is case sensitive, and all instructions and functions are in the lower case. If you used print with a capital P instead of print with a lowercase p, there would be no output, as you can see here. The second thing to note is that hello world is in quotation marks because it is a string. Lastly, a note that will be useful for later is that hashes are used to make comments that do not affect the code. You'll see me use this later in the video. There are 5 different types of data. The most commonly worked with types are numerical data, string data, and list data. The 2 other types of data are dictionaries and tuples. Dictionaries is data that you use passively, so it's somewhat unknowingly, and tuples are definitely rare. Now, back to the programming. The next concept we will look at is assigning variables and declaring arrays. Arrays are essentially lists. They can be one-dimensional or two-dimensional. When assigning variables, please use words that explain what their intentions are so that if anyone were to read your code, they would understand. In Python, when you want to assign a variable to something, you use the following prompt. Variable equals variable type. So for example, count is assigned or equal to 0. When declaring arrays, you should start with the array name and then the declaration, which is square brackets. For example, my R equals square brackets. These 2 declarations will be helpful in using the 2 types of loops in Python. We will start with the easier one, which is the while loop. The while loop operates by giving it a condition, and the action will be repeated until the condition comes true. For example, if you wanted to add numbers to an array until there are 5 numbers in the array, you would use the following code that I'm typing on the screen. Now, many things may confuse you about the code above, and let's break them down piece by piece. Firstly, the line num is assigned input. Input is what prompts the user of the code to enter an input. It is usually best that an input follows a prompt afterward, so that a user knows exactly what they're inputting. In the case of this code, if I were to run it, it would just request inputs, as you saw earlier, which would confuse someone who doesn't know what the code is for. So again, for ease of understanding, it'd be better for us to use the statement num is assigned input, and in brackets, input a number. Secondly, the function .append. It is used to add an item to an array, and this is an example of a dictionary data type, which, as I said, are used in passive. The function .append always takes a value, and if there is no value, your code will not work. Thirdly, Python has various functions for expressing arithmetics. An exclamation mark and an equal sign means do not equal. Two equal signs mean equal, because one equal sign means assignment. Less than or equal to means less than or equal to. Greater than or equal to means greater than or equal to. An asterisk is used for multiplication, and a forward slash is used for division. Now, let's look at a more complex loop, still using an array. When you use the function len, myArray, the function len shows the length of whatever it is in that bracket. For example, if you were looking for len and in brackets pi, it would be equal to 3. It is usually used for checking word length or array length. Lastly, the while loop can be used with Boolean conditions, true or false. So while count and len myArray or myAr is less than 5, this statement means that both myAr and count will have to equal 5 for the loop to break. If one equals 5 and the other does not, the loop will continue. If you don't understand Boolean logic, comment below, and I can make a video explaining just that. Now, let's move on to a loop that took me a fairly long time to understand its use. The for loop. The for loop runs a process over and over for the set amount of times you give it, until it reaches that limit. This sounds similar to a while loop. However, it can only take a range and run a process within that range. It does not take a condition, and is one of the easier loops to use when you're doing a repetitive process that isn't complicated. The first thing that you see is for I in range 5. And the first thing to note about that is I is a type of counter. Once all the steps under the for loop are complete, I will automatically increment, which means add 1 to itself, and the process will repeat. The second thing to note is that range can be given a starting number and a stopping number. For example, as you can see, you can say in range 2 to 4. The len function also comes in handy here. If you have already filled an array and you want to print it, for example, you can simply say for I in len myArray. The last thing to note, and this is important for arrays too, Python starts counting at 0, not 1. So if you put range 5, Python will count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is technically 6 numbers. The same can be said for an array. If you're looking for the first value in an array, you would need to call myArray and in square brackets 0, instead of myArray and in square brackets 1, because the second one will return the second element of the array to you, not the first. The last thing to note is if statements. These are the building blocks of testing conditions and adding options to an array. An if statement is similar to a while statement because both take a condition. However, if the if statement is true, it carries out the procedure underneath. If the statement is false, it goes to the else statement. This sounds confusing, but let me give you an example to help you understand. So we initialize count, and then we say if count equals 1, count equals count plus 1. Else, count is count minus 1. Now, this also works for multiple cases. You just have to use elif, which is short for else if, to allow various conditions. For example, if you want a user to input a letter of the alphabet, but only A and B will be recorded, you can do the following. Initialize count and have the variable letter be assigned input with the prompt input a letter in the alphabet. Then you start with if letter is equal to A, and note that A is in brackets, apostrophes, because it is a string. Count is assigned count plus 1. Elif letter is equal to B, count is assigned count plus 1. And else, pass. Pass means to move on in the code, and break, a term I used earlier, means to exit a loop. Please comment if you have any questions or if there's any topic you would like me to cover in another video. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to know when we've uploaded a new video. Bye!